Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of Earth's largest orbital defense station, watching the stars through the massive viewing window. He had been stationed here for 3 years and never got tired of the view. Earth hung below like a blue marble while the moon drifted silently in the distance. Space was peaceful this morning, just like every other morning for the past decade. The morning routine was always the same. Jake would drink his coffee, check the overnight reports, and prepare for another quiet day of monitoring space traffic. Commercial ships moved between Earth and the outer colonies, while mining vessels hauled precious metals from the asteroid belt. Everything was normal and predictable. Then the alarms started screaming. Lieutenant Bobby Chun rushed to his station and began typing frantically on his keyboard. His face went pale as data flooded his screen. Jake set down his coffee cup and walked over to see what was happening. The numbers on the screen made no sense at first. "Sir, we have multiple contacts appearing at the edge of the solar system," Bobby said with a shaky voice. "They just materialized out of nowhere. The computer is counting 12 massive objects, each one bigger than our largest space station." Jake felt his stomach drop. In all his years of military service, he had never seen anything like this. The objects were arranged in a perfect formation, clearly artificial and definitely not human. They had been waiting for this moment their entire lives, but now that it was here, Jake realized nobody was truly ready. "Sound General Quarters and contact Earth Command immediately," Jake ordered. "Get me a direct line to the President." The bridge erupted into controlled chaos as officers ran to their stations and began following emergency protocols. Red lights flashed throughout the station while the general alarm echoed through every corridor. Jake had drilled his crew for this scenario hundreds of times, but the real thing felt completely different. The communication officer established contact with Earth Command within minutes. President Alex Rodriguez appeared on the main screen, looking tired but alert. He had obviously been woken up by the emergency call, but his voice was steady and calm. "Admiral Morrison, what's our situation up there?" the president asked. "Sir, we have 12 large alien vessels positioned at the edge of our solar system. They appeared without warning about 10 minutes ago. We're still gathering data, but initial scans suggest they're much more advanced than anything we have." The president nodded slowly. Jake could see him processing the information and probably thinking about the millions of decisions that would need to be made in the coming hours. This was the moment that would define humanity's future, and everyone knew it. Suddenly, every screen on the station flickered and changed to show the same image. A tall, thin creature with pale blue skin and large black eyes stared out at them. It wore elaborate robes covered in strange symbols and spoke in perfect English with a voice that sounded like grinding metal. "People of Earth, I am Ambassador Crixon of the Zephyrian Confederation. We have been watching your species for many decades and have decided that your expansion into space must end immediately." Jake exchanged glances with his officers. The aliens. Words were polite, but there was something threatening in its tone. The creature continued speaking while its black eyes seemed to stare directly at each person watching. "Your species has shown itself to be violent and aggressive. You wage wars against your own kind and consume resources without thought for the future. We cannot allow such a primitive race to spread beyond your home system and threaten the peace of the galaxy." The president leaned forward in his chair. Jake could see anger building in his expression, but the president kept his voice controlled. This was diplomacy at the highest level, and every word mattered. "Therefore, Ambassador Crixon continued, the Zephyrian Confederation hereby demands that humanity immediately cease all space exploration beyond your moon. You will surrender all military vessels to our representatives and submit to our oversight of your technological development. You have exactly 72 hours to comply with these demands." The alien paused and its expression became even more cold and threatening. If you refuse to accept our generous offer of protection, we will be forced to eliminate your species as a threat to galactic peace. Your orbital installations will be destroyed, your cities will be reduced to ash, and your planet will be left uninhabitable. The choice is yours. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving everyone on the bridge staring at blank screens. The silence stretched for several long seconds before the president spoke again. Admiral, I want you to implement Defense Protocol 7 immediately. Contact all fleet commanders and have them report to their assigned positions. We're going to need every ship and every weapon we have. Jake felt a mixture of fear and excitement. Defense Protocol 7 was the most classified military plan in human history. It had been developed in secret over the past 20 years by the best military minds on Earth. The plan assumed that humanity would eventually encounter a hostile alien species, and it prepared for exactly this scenario. Yes, sir. Implementing Protocol 7 now, Jake replied. He turned to his communications officer. Send the activation codes to all fleet commanders. Tell them this is not a drill. As his crew began following the protocol, Jake thought about his wife and children back on Earth. They were probably watching the news right now, seeing reports about the alien ultimatum. The whole world would be in panic within hours. But that was exactly what the protocol had planned for. Dr. Lisa Campbell was in her laboratory at the Xenobiology Research Institute when the transmission played on every screen in the building. She had dedicated her life to studying the possibility of alien life, and now her worst fears were coming true. The aliens were not the peaceful explorers that scientists had hoped to encounter. They were conquerors who saw humanity as a threat. Lisa immediately began analyzing every detail of the transmission. The alien's appearance, its language patterns, and the technology visible in the background all provided clues about their capabilities. She worked frantically, knowing that every piece of information could help humanity survive the next 72 hours. Meanwhile, Captain Roy Sullivan was aboard the deep space research vessel UES Explorer near Jupiter when his communication system picked up the transmission. His small crew gathered around the main screen to watch Ambassador Crichton deliver the ultimatum. Roy had been exploring the outer system for 2 years, searching for signs of alien life. Now he had found more than he ever wanted. The Explorer was too far from Earth to make it back before the deadline, but Roy knew his mission had just become more important than ever. His ship carried the most advanced sensors in the human fleet, and he was in the perfect position to gather intelligence about the alien forces. He ordered his crew to change course toward the edge of the solar system, where the Zephyrian ships waited dot as news of the ultimatum spread across Earth. President Rodriguez called an emergency session of the United Nations. World leaders gathered in New York within hours, putting aside their differences to face this unprecedented threat. Defense Secretary Clary Thompson presented the latest intelligence while General Ben Parker outlined humanity's military capabilities. The 72-hour countdown had begun, and everyone knew that humanity's response would determine whether the human race survived or became extinct. The aliens had made their demands clear, but they had underestimated the one thing that made humans different from every other species in the galaxy. Humans never surrendered without a fight. President Alex Rodriguez stood before the largest gathering of world leaders in human history. The United Nations Assembly Hall was packed beyond capacity as every nation on Earth sent their most important officials to New York. Outside the building, millions of people watched on massive screens while billions more followed the emergency. Broadcast from their homes, the 72-hour deadline was now down to 68 hours, and the world was waiting for humanity's response to the alien ultimatum. Rodriguez had spent the last 4 hours in closed meetings with military commanders, scientists, and world leaders, planning what might be the most important speech in human history. He walked to the podium and looked out at the sea of faces staring. Back at him, these people represented every nation, every culture, and every belief system on Earth. But today, they were united by a single purpose. The aliens had threatened all of humanity, and humanity would respond as one. "Fellow humans," Rodriguez began, his voice carrying clearly through the hall into every corner of the planet. 4 hours ago, an alien species calling themselves the Zephyrian Confederation delivered an ultimatum to our world. They demand that we abandon our dreams of exploring the stars, surrender our defenses, and submit to their rule. The hall remained completely silent. Rodriguez paused for a moment, letting his words sink in before continuing. "They believe we are primitive and violent. They think we will bow down in fear when faced with their superior technology. They expect us to choose slavery over freedom because they assume we value our lives more than our dignity." His voice grew stronger with each word. "They are wrong." A murmur rippled through the assembly. Rodriguez raised his hand for silence and continued his speech. "Throughout our history, humans have faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. We have survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and natural disasters that would have destroyed weaker species. We have always found a way to overcome challenges that seemed insurmountable." He paused again, looking directly into the cameras that were broadcasting his words to the alien fleet. "Today, we face our greatest challenge yet, and our answer remains the same." Rodriguez stepped closer to the microphone, his voice now carrying the weight of every human who had ever lived and died for freedom. "To the Zephyrian Confederation, I deliver this message on behalf of all humanity. We bow to no one. We will not surrender our ships, abandon our colonies, or submit to your authority. Earth belongs to humans, and we will defend it with everything. We have." The hall erupted in applause, but Rodriguez was not finished. "You have given us 72 hours to surrender. We give you the same amount of time to leave our solar system peacefully. After that, any alien vessel remaining in our space will be considered an act of war." The applause was deafening now. World leaders who had been enemies just days before were standing and cheering together. Rodriguez waited for the noise to die down before delivering his final words. "We are human. We do not yield. We do not surrender. And we do not fear you." He looked directly into the main camera. "Come and take it." As the president's speech ended, Commander Nina Watson was already implementing humanity's response. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, she stood in the command center of the most classified military installation on Earth. Project Fortress Sol had been under development for 20 years, hidden from the public and even from most government officials. Project began after the first detection of artificial signals from deep space in 2045. A small group of military planners realized that humanity might not be alone in the universe, and that first contact might not be peaceful. They began preparing for exactly this scenario, building defenses that could protect Earth from threats beyond anything humans had ever faced. Nina watched as massive screens displayed the locations of hidden weapons platforms throughout the solar system. Orbital battle stations disguised as research facilities powered up their weapon systems. Asteroid mining operations revealed themselves to be heavily armed missile bases. Even the moon base, which the public thought was just a scientific outpost, transformed into a fortress bristling with defensive weapons. "All stations report ready for combat operations," her deputy commander reported. "The aliens have no idea what we've been building out there." Nina nodded with satisfaction. The Zephyrians had been watching humanity for decades, but they had only seen what humans wanted them to see. Every space launch, every mining operation, and every scientific mission had been carefully planned to hide the true extent of human military preparation. Dr. Lisa Campbell was making her own preparations in her laboratory. She had been analyzing the alien transmission for hours, studying every detail of Ambassador Crixon's appearance and technology. Her team of xenobiologists and linguists worked around the clock to understand their enemy better. The translator technology they're using is incredibly advanced, her assistant noted while reviewing the data. They learned our language perfectly, but there are subtle patterns in their speech that suggest they don't really understand human psychology. Lisa looked up from her computer screen. This was exactly the kind of information it could make the difference between victory and defeat. What do you mean? They keep referring to us as primitive and violent, but their own ultimatum is the most violent thing in this entire situation. They're projecting their own nature onto us, while assuming we'll react with fear instead of anger. Meanwhile, Captain Roy Sullivan was discovering something that would change everything. His research vessel, UES Explorer, had been studying the moons of Jupiter when the alien ultimatum arrived. But Roy had immediately changed course to investigate some unusual energy readings near Europa. What his team found beneath the ice of Jupiter's moon was beyond anything they had imagined. Ancient structures built by a civilization that had vanished millions of years ago lay hidden in the dark ocean beneath Europa's frozen surface. The technology was far more advanced than anything the Zephyrians possessed. "Captain, you need to see this," his science officer called out. "These ruins are covered in warning messages written in dozens of different languages. It's like they were expecting someone to find them eventually." Roy studied the translated messages on his screen. The ancient race called themselves the predecessors, and their warnings spoke of a great threat that had destroyed their civilization. The descriptions matched the Zephyrian Confederation perfectly. "They knew this day would come," Roy said quietly. "They've been waiting for someone like us to find them." Deep in the ruins, Roy's team discovered something that made their hearts race with excitement. The predecessors had built automated defense systems throughout the galaxy, designed to activate when younger species faced extinction from the same threat that had destroyed them. All they needed was someone to turn on the activation beacon. Back on Earth, Admiral Jake Morrison coordinated the movement of human forces throughout the solar system. Ships that had been disguised as cargo haulers revealed their true nature as heavily armed warships. Mining stations became forward operating bases. Even civilian spacecraft were being armed with whatever weapons could be mounted on their hulls. The alien fleet remained at the edge of the solar system, apparently confident that their ultimatum would be accepted. They had probably given similar ultimatums to dozens of other species, and those species had all surrendered without a fight. They were about to learn that humans were different. Defense Secretary Claire Thompson stood beside President Rodriguez as they watched the final preparations unfold. Military commanders around the world reported their readiness, while civilian populations were evacuated from potential target areas. Everyone knew that the next 64 hours would determine whether humanity survived as a free species or disappeared entirely. "Do you think we have a chance?" Thompson asked quietly. Rodriguez looked out at the stars visible through the command center's armored windows. Somewhere out there, 12 alien warships waited to destroy everything humans had ever built. The odds seemed impossible, but humans had faced impossible odds before and found a way to win. "They made one critical mistake," Rodriguez replied. "They assumed we would react like every other species they've conquered. They don't understand that humans fight harder when we're backed into a corner." As the 64-hour mark approached, humanity's response was clear. Every human military installation was armed and ready. Every spaceship capable of fighting had taken its position. Every person on Earth understood that surrender was not an option. The aliens had demanded submission, but they were about to discover that humans had spent their entire history refusing to submit to anyone or anything. The stage was set for a battle that would determine the fate of not just humanity, but every free species in the galaxy. The 72-hour deadline expired at exactly 14:30 Earth Standard Time. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his orbital defense station, watching the alien fleet through his telescopes. The 12 massive Zephyrian ships had moved closer to Earth during the night, taking positions that would allow them to attack the planet from multiple directions at once. At 14:31, Jake opened a communication channel that would broadcast to every human facility in the solar system and to the alien fleet waiting in the darkness of space. His voice was calm and steady as he delivered humanity's final message to their would-be conquerors. This is Admiral Jake Morrison of Earth Defense Command speaking to the Zephyrian Confederation. Your ultimatum has expired, and we have not surrendered. This is our solar system, and these are our worlds. If you want them, come and take them. The response was immediate. The largest Zephyrian ship launched a probe toward Earth's orbital defenses. The small craft moved slowly, probably taking detailed scans of human positions and capabilities. Jake watched it approach through his tactical display, knowing that this was the last moment of peace humanity would know for a very long time. All stations, weapons are free, Jake announced. Engage any hostile target that enters our defensive perimeter. The probe crossed the invisible line that marked Earth's defensive zone, and instantly the sky lit up with weapons fire. Hidden gun platforms throughout the orbital region opened fire simultaneously, turning the small alien craft into glowing debris in seconds. The first shot of the war had been fired by humanity, exactly as Jake had planned. The Zephyrian response was swift and overwhelming. All 12 alien ships began moving toward Earth at incredible speed while launching fighter craft that swung toward human positions like angry insects. Their weapons were unlike anything humans had ever seen, firing beams of pure energy that could slice through steel like paper. But the aliens quickly discovered that humans were not the helpless primitives they had expected. As the first wave of Zephyrian fighters approached Earth's moon, they flew directly into a trap that had been 20 years in the making. What appeared to be a simple scientific research station suddenly revealed massive weapon systems that had been hidden beneath fake outer shells. Steve Collins commanded the lunar defense batteries that opened fire on the approaching alien fighters. His railguns launched solid metal projectiles at incredible speeds, turning the advanced alien craft into clouds of expanding gas and debris. The aliens had energy shields that could deflect laser weapons, but they had no defense against simple kinetic energy delivered at relativistic speeds. Target-rich environment, Steve reported over the communication system as his guns continued firing. These aliens don't know how to fight against projectile weapons. Their shields are designed for energy attacks. The alien fighters that survived. The first barrage tried to adapt their tactics, but they found themselves facing an enemy that refused to fight according to the rules they understood. Human ships attacked from unexpected angles, used cover in ways the aliens had never seen, and employed weapons that seemed primitive but proved devastatingly effective. Captain Helen Baker led a squadron of stealth fighters in a daring attack against the Zephyrian command ship. Her small craft were invisible to alien sensors, allowing them to approach the massive vessel undetected. The aliens had built their ship to withstand attacks from other energy weapons, but they had never considered the possibility of enemies who would fly small ships directly into their hull and detonate nuclear weapons at point-blank range. Helen's attack damaged the command ship badly enough to disrupt communications between the alien fleet and their fighter squadrons. Without coordination, the Zephyrian attack began to fall apart as individual ships found themselves isolated and overwhelmed by human defenders who worked together with perfect teamwork. Dr. Lisa Campbell watched the battle unfold from her laboratory, while working frantically to activate the beacon that Captain Roy Sullivan had discovered in the predecessor ruins. The ancient device was incredibly complex, requiring her to solve puzzles that had been designed by a civilization millions of years more advanced than humanity. The predecessors knew that younger species would eventually find their technology. Lisa explained to her team as they worked. But they made sure that only species with the right combination of intelligence and determination could activate their defenses. Roy's team on Europa had been working around the clock to unlock the secrets of the ancient ruins. The predecessors had left behind detailed records of their war against the Zephian Confederation, including tactical information that could help humanity survive the current battle. They fought the same enemy we're fighting now, Roy reported. To Earth Command. The Zephyrians destroyed the predecessor civilization, but not before they could prepare these automated defenses for future victims. As Lisa finally solved the last puzzle and activated the beacon, something extraordinary happened throughout the galaxy. Ancient defense platforms that had been dormant for millions of years suddenly came to life near dozens of star systems. The predecessors had built a network of automated guardians, specifically designed to activate when the Zephyrians threatened younger species with extinction. The effect on the battle was immediate. Zephyrian reinforcement fleets that had been approaching the solar system suddenly found themselves under attack by weapons they thought had been destroyed eons ago. Supply ships carrying ammunition and fuel were vaporized by ancient Guardian platforms that appeared without warning. Commander, Tony Rivera's research team had been working on humanity's most secret weapons project when the war began. They had discovered how to weaponize quantum entanglement technology, creating weapons that could strike targets instantly across vast distances without any travel time for projectiles or energy beams. The quantum torpedoes are ready for deployment, Tony reported to Admiral Morrison. We can hit any target in the solar system instantly, and there's no way for them to intercept or deflect the attack. The first quantum torpedo test exceeded all expectations. Tony's team targeted a Zephyrian destroyer that was attacking a mining station near Mars. One moment the alien ship was firing on human defenders, and the next moment it simply disappeared in a flash of exotic energy. The quantum weapon had bypassed every defense the aliens possessed. The tide of battle shifted dramatically as human forces began deploying their new weapons. Zephyrian ships that had seemed invincible suddenly found themselves vulnerable to attacks they could not understand or counter. The aliens' technological superiority meant nothing against weapons that operated according to principles they had never encountered. Admiral Morrison coordinated the defense from his command station, watching as human forces throughout the solar system reported victory after victory. The aliens were retreating from multiple positions, their formation breaking apart as individual ships fled toward the edge of the solar system. All stations, begin pursuit operations, Morrison ordered. Do not let them regroup. Press the attack while we have the advantage. Captain Amy Foster led a squadron of quantum-armed ships in pursuit of the fleeing Zephyrian forces. Her mission was to ensure that none of the alien ships escaped to bring reinforcements or report on humanity's unexpected capabilities. The hunters had become the hunted, and humanity intended to make sure the lesson was permanent. As news of the human victory spread throughout the galaxy, something unprecedented began to happen. Species that had been conquered and enslaved by the Zephyrian Confederation began to rise in rebellion. The sight of a young species successfully defending itself against the galaxy's greatest military power inspired hope in civilizations that had given up centuries ago. The first battle was over, but the war was just beginning. Humanity had proven that the Zephyrian Confederation could be defeated, and that discovery would change the balance of power throughout the galaxy forever. The aliens had come to Earth expecting an easy victory over a primitive species, but instead, they had awakened a sleeping giant that would not rest until every free world in the galaxy was protected from tyranny. News of humanity's victory against the Zephyrian fleet spread across the galaxy faster than anyone had imagined possible. Within days of the battle, rebel groups on dozens of worlds were rising up against their Zephyrian overlords. Species that had been enslaved for centuries suddenly found the courage to fight back, inspired by the example of the young human race that had refused to surrender. Captain Amy Foster stood on the bridge of the UE's Retribution as it prepared for humanity's first military expedition beyond the solar system. Her ship carried a crew of 200 volunteers and a cargo hold full of quantum weapons that could be shared with rebel forces throughout the galaxy. The mission was dangerous and possibly suicidal, but every crew member had volunteered eagerly for the chance to carry the fight to the enemy. All stations report ready for departure, her navigation officer announced. Course is set for the Velcani system. Estimated travel time is 6 days using our new quantum drive. Amy nodded and settled into her command chair. The Velcani were an aquatic species that had been enslaved by the Zephyrians for over 300 years. Their shipbuilding expertise had been used to construct most of the Confederation's fleet, but intelligence reports suggested they were ready to rebel if they received support from human forces. The journey through hyperspace gave Amy time to study the intelligence reports that Dr. Lisa Campbell's team had compiled from the predecessor archives. The ancient race had left behind detailed information about every species in the galaxy, including their strengths, weaknesses, and potential for resisting Zephyrian control. According to the records, the Velcani had never truly accepted their conquest. They had sabotaged Zephyrian ships whenever possible and maintained secret communication networks that allowed them to coordinate resistance activities. All they needed was weapons and leadership to turn their passive resistance into open rebellion. When the Retribution emerged from hyperspace near the Velcani homeworld, Amy was amazed by what she saw. The ocean planet was surrounded by massive orbital shipyards, where hundreds of Zephyrian vessels were under construction. But as her ship approached, she noticed something strange happening to the alien fleet. Ships throughout the orbital yards were exploding without warning. Zephyrian crews were abandoning their vessels as fires spread through the construction facilities. The Velcani had not waited for human arrival to begin their rebellion. They had started the revolution on their own. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the surface, her communication officer reported. It's coming from the Velcani resistance leaders. The main screen flickered to life, showing a group of aquatic beings speaking through translation devices. Their leader, a massive creature with tentacles instead of arms, addressed Amy directly. Human Captain, we have been waiting for your arrival since news of your victory reached our world. We are ready to join your alliance and fight alongside you against our common enemy. Our shipyards are already under our control, and we can begin producing vessels for the rebellion immediately. Amy smiled as she realized that humanity's role in the Galactic War was changing rapidly. Instead of fighting alone against impossible odds, they were becoming the leaders of a growing alliance of free worlds. The Zephyrians had made enemies of every species they had conquered, and now those enemies were uniting under human leadership. Meanwhile, Admiral Jake Morrison was coordinating similar alliances throughout the galaxy from his command station in Earth orbit. The predecessor beacon had awakened automated defense platforms near 47 different star systems, and each activation had triggered local rebellions against Zephyrian rule. The crystalline Nexari had provided advanced shield technology in exchange for quantum weapons. The insectoid Thrakari offered their expertise in guerrilla warfare tactics. Even the peaceful ethereal collective, a species of energy beings, had agreed to share their knowledge of faster-than-light communication in support of the rebellion. We're not just fighting a war anymore, Morrison told President Rodriguez during their daily briefing. We're building a new galactic civilization based on freedom and cooperation instead of conquest and oppression. Dr. Lisa Campbell led the most important expedition in human history as she traveled to the predecessor homeworld with representatives from 6 rebel species. The ancient planet was a graveyard of wonders, covered in ruins that contained technology beyond anything the current galaxy had achieved. The journey to the predecessor capital city revealed the true scope of the ancient civilization's accomplishments. They had built cities that floated in the sky, powered by energy sources that still functioned after millions of years. Their archives contained the accumulated knowledge of hundreds of species, all preserved for future generations to discover. They knew they were going to lose the war, Lisa explained to her companions as they explored the central archive building. But they refused to let their knowledge die with them. Everything they learned, everything they built, was designed to help younger species like us continue the fight they could not finish. The most important discovery came in the deepest vault of the archive complex. The predecessors had left behind the complete tactical analysis of every Zephyrian military formation, every weapon system, and every strategic doctrine. They had spent their final years studying their enemy so thoroughly that future generations would have every advantage possible. General Ben Parker was using this information to train the first joint military units in galactic history. Human soldiers worked alongside alien warriors, learning each other's strengths and developing new tactics that combined the best of every species. The training sessions were remarkable to observe. Humans taught the aliens about improvisation and creative problem solving. The aliens taught humans about advanced technology and exotic combat techniques. Together, they developed strategies that neither species could have created alone. The Zephyrians have been fighting the same way for thousands of years, Parker explained to his mixed species officer corps. They expect every enemy to use conventional military tactics. When we combine human creativity with alien technology, we create something they cannot predict or counter. The first joint operation was a raid on a Zephyrian supply depot in the Outer Rim territories. The strike force included human special forces, Velkhane engineers, Nexari shield specialists, and Thrakari infiltration experts, working together. They captured enough weapons and supplies to equip 10 rebel worlds, while demonstrating the effectiveness of interspecies cooperation. Captain Roy Sullivan continued his exploration of predecessor sites throughout the galaxy, uncovering new technologies and ancient weapons that could tip the balance of the war. Each discovery was shared immediately with all rebel forces, ensuring that every species benefited from the ancient race's legacy. One of the most significant finds was a predecessor shipyard that had been hidden inside a hollowed-out asteroid. The facility contained construction templates for vessels more advanced than anything the Zephyrians possessed, powered by quantum engines that could travel between galaxies in days instead of years. Commander Nina Watson oversaw the production of these incredible ships using a combination of human engineering, Velkhane construction expertise, and predecessor technology. The first vessel to roll out of the secret shipyard was twice the size of any Zephyrian dreadnought and armed with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. As the rebellion grew stronger, the Zephyrian Confederation began to panic. They had never faced an organized resistance movement before, and they had no idea how to combat enemies who refused to follow conventional military rules. Their empire, built over thousands of years of easy conquests, was crumbling as world after world declared independence. The war was entering a new phase, with rebel forces taking the offensive for the first time in galactic history. Humanity had not only survived the alien ultimatum, but had transformed it into the spark that would ignite the greatest liberation movement the galaxy had ever seen. The next phase would be the most dangerous yet, as the rebels prepared to take the war directly to the Zephyrian homeworld and end their reign of terror forever. The combined fleet that approached Zephyria Prime was the largest military force the galaxy had ever assembled. Over 3,000 ships from 20 different species moved through space in perfect formation, led by Admiral Jake Morrison aboard. The flagship U.S. Defiance. The vessel was a masterpiece of interspecies cooperation, built using human engineering, predecessor technology, and materials provided by every member of the Rebel Alliance. Morrison stood on the bridge watching the Zephyrian homeworld grow larger on his screen. The planet was protected by defensive systems that had never been defeated in over 5,000 years of galactic conquest. Massive space stations surrounded the world like metal moons, each one armed with enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. The sight would have been terrifying to any conventional military force, but this was no conventional fleet. All ships report ready for final assault, Commander Nina Watson announced from her position at the tactical station. The quantum weapons are charged, and the predecessor Guardian platforms are in position. The battle plan was elegant in its simplicity. While the main fleet engaged the orbital defenses, special strike teams would use captured Zephyrian ships to penetrate the inner defensive ring and capture the High Council alive. Meanwhile, predecessor Guardian platforms would emerge from hyperspace at strategic points to prevent any Zephyrian reinforcements from reaching the battle. Victoria Hayes led the most dangerous part of the operation aboard a captured Zephyrian cruiser. Her boarding team included the best soldiers from every species in the Alliance, trained specifically for close combat in the corridors and chambers of enemy ships. Their mission was to reach the High Council chambers and end the war by capturing the alien leadership dot as the fleet entered weapons range. The first phase of the battle began. Zephyrian defense stations opened fire with their most powerful weapons, sending streams of deadly energy across the void. But the rebel ships were protected by Nixari shields that had been improved with predecessor technology, making them nearly invulnerable to the alien attacks. The human response was devastating. Quantum torpedoes struck the defense stations with impossible precision, bypassing their shields entirely and destroying critical systems from within. Velcani-built ships released swarms of fighter craft that moved like schools of fish, confusing alien targeting systems with their fluid formations. Captain Amy Foster commanded a wing of advanced fighters in an attack on the largest orbital fortress. Her pilots had trained for months to coordinate their attacks with alien allies, and their teamwork was flawless. Human creativity combined with alien technology created tactics that the Zephyrians could not understand or counter. Target the shield generators first, Amy ordered over the communication system. Once their defenses are down, the heavy ships can move in for the kill. The fortress that had protected Zephyria Prime for millennia fell within an hour. Its massive guns went silent one by one as rebel fighters destroyed the power systems and weapon emplacements. The sight of the ancient stronghold burning sent shockwaves through the defending fleet, causing several Zephyrian commanders to surrender rather than face certain destruction. Meanwhile, Captain Hayes and her boarding team had successfully infiltrated the High Council complex. The Zephyrian leaders had retreated to their most secure bunker, protected by energy barriers and automated defense systems that had never been breached. But Hayes had brought weapons and equipment that the aliens had never encountered before. Dr. Lisa Campbell monitored the boarding operation from the command ship, using her knowledge of Zephyrian psychology to guide the assault team through the complex. The aliens' own arrogance worked against them as they retreated deeper into their fortress, isolating themselves from their remaining forces. The High Council chamber is just ahead, Hayes reported as her team moved through corridors lined with the treasures of 1,000 conquered worlds. Their security systems are down, and we have them trapped. The final confrontation was almost anticlimactic. The 12 members of the Zephyrian High Council, beings who had ruled the galaxy for over 5,000 years, found themselves face to face with soldiers from the species they had tried to exterminate. Ambassador Quixon, who had delivered the ultimatum to Earth months earlier, stared in disbelief at the human captain who now held his fate in her hands. "This is impossible," Crixon said, his metallic voice filled with confusion and fear. "You are a primitive species. You should have surrendered like all the others." Hayes looked at the alien leader with calm determination. "You made the same mistake that every tyrant in human history has made. You assumed that might makes right and that fear is stronger than freedom. You are wrong." The capture of the High Council effectively ended Zephyrian resistance throughout the galaxy. Without their central leadership, the remaining alien forces either surrendered or fled to the distant edges of known space. The war that had threatened to exterminate humanity had instead liberated every oppressed species in the galaxy. Admiral Morrison coordinated the transition as rebel forces took control of former Zephyrian territories. Instead of creating a new empire to replace the old one, the Alliance established a democratic council where every species had an equal voice. The principles that President Rodriguez had outlined in his defiant speech became the foundation for a new galactic civilization. Dr. Campbell became the first human ambassador to the newly formed Galactic Liberation Council. Her role was to ensure that the lessons learned from the predecessor archives were shared with every member species, preventing future tyrants from arising to threaten galactic peace. The quantum entanglement technology that had turned the tide of the war revolutionized galactic communication and trade. Instead of taking months to travel between star systems, messages and even small objects could be transmitted instantly across vast distances. The galaxy became smaller and more connected than ever before. General Ben Parker established the Galactic Defense Academy on Earth, where officers from every species trained together to protect their new alliance. The Academy's motto, carved in stone above the main entrance, was taken from President Rodriguez's historic speech, "We bow to no one." Captain Roy Sullivan continued his exploration of predecessor sites, but now his mission had changed from desperate survival to joyful discovery. Each ancient ruin revealed new wonders and technologies that could improve life for every species in the galaxy. The predecessors' greatest gift was not their weapons, but their knowledge and their faith in younger races. As the first anniversary of the alien ultimatum approached, humanity reflected on how completely their world had changed. Earth was no longer an isolated planet on the edge of nowhere, but the birthplace of galactic freedom and the home of the species that had sparked the greatest liberation in history. Children from dozens of worlds now played together in Earth's parks while their parents worked side by side to build a better future. The diversity that had once divided humanity became their greatest strength as they learned to appreciate the unique gifts that each species brought to their alliance. Admiral Morrison stood once again on the bridge of his orbital station, looking out at the stars that no longer seemed cold and distant. Somewhere in that vast darkness, new species were discovering space travel and taking their first steps toward the stars. When they arrived, they would find a galaxy where freedom was protected by beings who understood that the greatest strength came not from conquest, but from the courage to stand together against tyranny. The ultimatum that was meant to end human expansion had instead begun humanity's greatest adventure. The young species that had refused to surrender had grown into the guardians of galactic freedom, proving that sometimes the smallest voice could speak the loudest truth. Earth's children would carry that truth to the farthest reaches of the universe, ensuring that no species would ever again face extinction alone.